Welcome back to Rounding the Bases on YouTube, presented by Community America, Chief of Staff, Kansas City. 4 final questions as we round the bases with Lucas. He is the president and CEO of Core Affinity. You can check them out at coreaffinity.com. When we finished, Lucas, the audio version of this podcast, you were talking about having Thankful Thursdays and everyone within your group talking about what they're thankful for. I love that idea, especially as so many organizations are looking to find ways to bring people together, oftentimes virtually, and getting people to open up. So you turn the tables on me. You asked me what I was thankful for. Let me turn the tables on you. What are you thankful for as our first question?
Oh, okay. That's good. These were unscripted, which I like.
Yeah.
So this will sound a little scripted, but it's really not. I think about this often. I'm just really, really thankful for my team. So team at Core Affinity, I have another organization I also help lead called Big Red M, who also services association market and for purposes of selling sales sponsorship. We do some consulting there. And they're just fantastic. I can have a tendency, as I mentioned earlier, to say I could do it all and want to have my hands in it. And it's difficult for me as a leader sometimes to let go of things. I want to know, I want to be involved, and I want to help. But this is a team and organization that we've built that I just feel so confident and blessed to be a part of, that they give me that freedom to go and really think about, strategically, what do we need to do as a next move, and not have to be involved in necessarily every piece of the day-to-day, which would be my natural tendency to just put both hands in there, right, and figure it out with them. But that's my thankfulness.
Okay, second question as we round the bases. Your business is all about relationships. As I said in the audio version of this podcast, whose business is not about relationships. But I think what's interesting to me is that when you're dealing with associations, and certainly I do from a speaking standpoint, you're dealing with a very wide variety of people with a wide variety of needs, right? It's not always as specific as it is for, say, a certain company, because it's very much like what I do on TV. If I go on the air and just do hardcore sabermetric analytics, I'm going to lose people that aren't interested in that. And if I just do all the fluff and the human interest, not that all human interest is fluff, I might lose. So, you have to find that balance. What is that challenge like for you in your world? Because I feel like anybody that lives in that association world has to master being able to serve a lot of type of people.
Yeah, that's a great question. There are some commonalities to memberships and to what we do. The idea of driving value the way that we do it is somewhat unique, and you can be sort of industry agnostic to a degree, assuming you have to have enough knowledge in our world to understand the industry enough to be dangerous. If I was in a scenario where we're sourcing new partners, I need to understand that industry, and I need to be able to have enough conversation with them at the member level to understand what is going to bring you the value. I could go out and say, these are my choices, but getting the validation is a two-way conversation with the membership to understand. I'm not just going to shove something down your throat. You got to tell me also what works. And so sometimes we have that conversation back and forth digitally through our technology. Sometimes we literally will go out and have our people call members and talk about different supplier programs. And that information is valuable upstream with our association clients as well. They want to know that information. And so I go back to the quantitative, qualitative metrics that go into creating a really great relationships. The themes and the value sort of notion is universal. But the intricacies come down to the specific members for that organization and having that conversation.
All right, third question as we round the bases.
All right, third base.
Yes. You have, I think you told me 2 kids that are very involved in sports, athletic family, and I just wanted to kind of pick your brain on that a little bit, because I'm guessing that that's a bit of your release, your escape from the quote unquote real world is that athletic side with the family and the kids.
Yeah, so I played sports growing up. Bags were packed to go off to college and play basketball. I took a different route. My wife was heavy into sports. In fact, after college, and she came back and coached two sports at the high school level. And so, we live, as most parents do that come from sports, is, live vicariously a little bit through our kids. And I have, my sports that I hope they play, and she has, her indications of what they could play. And they're very different, the two kids, and their passions are going to be what they're going to be. And I'm learning to sort of just help guide them through their own lens rather than mine. I think that's a parental challenge in and of itself, but it's really, really fun to watch them grow up and play sports, and the excitement in their eyes. I mean, exactly when they hit their first ball, when they hit their first basket, when they kick in their first, whatever the sport is, when they get their first place ribbon in the pool. We play all these sports, and watching them, the excitement, that sort of makes it all worthwhile for me.
Couldn't agree with you more. And those are memories you have forever. Last question as we walk it off. I wanted to ask you just about, you told me about this when we first met on the phone, about being in that DC area and how much access that gives you to the association world. I saw, and I have an uncle that lives in Virginia, Fairfax, Virginia, and used to be in some government stuff. And at least from the outside, I've never lived there. It feels like, boy, that place is crazy. Now I'm just thinking about politics and lobbyists, all that type of stuff. It from what I hear is just a different place than anywhere else in the country. And oftentimes I hear about that as, well, a bad thing, I guess. It's things are different there with the world of politics. But then I look at the access and the amount of people that you have, and that has to be such a benefit for you. And of course, being home, what does it mean to have access to so many people in that DC area?
Yeah, we say we're strategically headquartered here, but my wife put the roots down here a long time ago, so I was going to be here regardless. But it's exactly right. If you look at the market, I'd say 70+%, sometimes we use higher numbers, of the national associations are headquartered here for lobbying purposes. And historically, that's been a big value proposition, is the advocacy and governance that they can help provide for a particular industry. And I don't think that's changing anytime soon. That a lot of them own blocks in Washington, D.C. and own buildings that don't make sense. Again, if we kick the rock down the road 20 years, maybe there'll be a migration of them as well outside of this. But for now, in the time being, yeah, I mean, I could get in my car and drive 4 miles across the river into DC, or even Old Town Alexandria, for those that know, that is also an association mecca. It's a hub. We joke that you could hit a pitching wedge off of downtown Alexandria and you'd probably knock off 4 or 5 association headquarters before it hit the ground. And there's some truth to that. But what it allows us to do is, as we're having these strategic conversations with them, or we're doing check-ins, I don't have to get on a plane and go somewhere. I get in my car and we go meet at Starbucks, or we go have lunch somewhere, and we talk about, hey, what else is going on in your association? What else is happening in your industry? And that's really the impetus for sort of growing our footprint at the right pace. Again, not wanting to go wide and flat, but what else could we provide for these associations that we're hearing, because we're having these sort of informal conversations, which is where it all comes from. You can't just send an email and hope that they see it and pick it up and sell your product or service. Therein lies a lot of the relationship starts from the top. And when you're here and you have that opportunity, it's much easier for us to build that rapport and have those conversations. And honestly, it is more difficult when those organizations are remote and we don't check in person as often enough. I would say it's harder to have the same level of trust and rapport and relationship that it is. Yeah. And unfortunately, we've had that experience where it is more difficult to maintain those relationships. And I think that just speaks volumes to what we talked about earlier, that snowball, and what creates that excitement is on the membership level, people coming back and getting in person really aids to their value. Some of them, they see their value increasing as they're able to have more of those intra-industry relationships, conversations, and transactions.
You are in the mecca to be able to be doing all of that and also able to talk about it on the podcast. Quick promotion for that before we get out of here. The name is great too, 6 Degrees of Association, which certainly leads to everything that you're doing. Tell me about that podcast.
Yeah, we started that podcast. Funny story. One of our national associations was telling us a story that they were sitting around the boardroom. They needed to redo their website. Anybody have any recommendations? Crickets. Hey, come back to the management meeting next week and let's talk about it. Everyone left, came back and said, don't really know who to go to or, who it is. And whether they were in their bubble, it doesn't really matter. Point is, if they had called me, for example, or probably anybody within our organizations that works with a lot of associates, we could have made 5 or 6 referrals. And so we said, you know what, let's have this podcast where we can bring on association executives to talk about, what's happening in their industry and best practices. Let's also bring some suppliers in and sort of start to introduce different opportunities to our executives, which are our audience primarily, and talk about some of that and sort of help them connect the dots through this form of media. And it's been great. We've gotten emails from people that said, hey, I met so-and-so on the from your pod and we made a connection and they're actually going to be doing some work with us. And that was really the whole point. And it just keeps going. And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where you get to dig a little bit deeper. Like, okay, this is great. This is a fun podcast. Wait a minute, it's bringing people together. It's made an introduction. It's done that, and whether that was the initial intended hope or not, that ends up being a consequence, and it ends up being a good thing. So I'll actually throw one more quick one in there then, because this is always evolving too, and it's a fascinating one to me. I love the topic of purpose. Almost getting before when I said they paid me to talk about baseball. This is great. It is, but where's the purpose in that? Then when you start seeing, wait a minute, there are people that live for this entertainment, whose lives are being made better by it, that feel closer to it because of something small that I'm doing. You start to find some purpose. Troops overseas. What's your purpose?
So
I'm ending with a really nice light one here.
Yeah, appreciate that. So in business, our purpose is really to help these organizations. I mean, whether it's through the pod, whether it's through a conversation, if we can just make a connection, if we can increase or help increase your value that you're bringing to your members. I mean, the beauty about our model, let's just talk for core for a second. If we bring a member together with a new supplier and that supplier is able to tie them to a contract, for example, that saves them some money, saves them time, does something that is advantageous for them or their business. Everybody wins, right? So the member gets something they didn't have access to. The supplier gets a new relationship. The association gets, increased value and ideally an ability to retain that membership and communication longer. And in the middle of that, we get to make that happen and through our services, and that's our businesses. And the more we can do that, we ultimately get to grow with that and do more. And then for Big Red M, same thing. I mean, we're connecting members, we're driving new members, we're helping promote these sponsors. And if we can bring a sponsor into an event, it helps promote their business, and the member can find value in that. They'll want to come back to that show again and again and again, and the association wins and everybody wins. So in my professional life, that is my purpose.
Love it. And I know we didn't talk a whole lot about it, but Big Red M, real simple to find, bigredm.com and coreaffinity.com. Lucas, this has been great. A lot of insight, as I knew it would be. Enjoyed it. Thanks so much for rounding the bases.
My pleasure, Joel. Thanks for having me on.